Now this for everybody fighting through the pain and the pressure. You know life will try to test you, but you promise not to give up for your mama and your sister, and your brother and your cousin, everybody else that's with you. You the one that's gonna deliver like Amazon Prime. Always on time, yeah. Even when it's looking bad, I never stop trying, cause I've been stressing, I've been crying. My depression had me blind. Sometimes I can't see the signs, but I keep going, I ain't lying. It's for everyone that's grinding for their kids, you're not alone. It's for every child that promised they gon' buy their mama home. For all my 9-to-5ers going hard to make that green clock out, then you just go harder, cause you still got chase that dream. For all my evolving artists, just keep going hard, regardless how people talking about us. You gon' build that startup.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Live with June. I am really excited to welcome my guest for my New Year Glow Up series. Let me know if you guys can hear me. I see Mommy Rapper. Nice track. Thank you. My friend Tone Oliver wrote that song, and we actually met on a BART ride into the city to San Francisco on my way to my job at Wish. So I'm a little bit nervous, you guys. Normally, I'm not as nervous, but this is someone that I have been following even before I started my journey here on LinkedIn, as someone who was sharing her story, as well as sharing my passion for helping job seekers. So I'm really excited to welcome him on the show. You probably know him. He's really huge on LinkedIn. His name is Mark Metry. He is the author of his published book called Screw Being Shy, and hosts his podcast, Human 2.0, which is actually one of the top 100 global podcasts. So let's welcome him in, Mark.
June, what's up? Yo, your intro music is absolute fire. I was dancing.
I saw you gabbing in the back.
Yo, it was so great. That was like the best thing. And we got Mommy Rapper here. Yeah,
yes. She actually performed in one of my last year. I hosted a LinkedIn talent show. I hosted that. This is another link. I had her on my launch party on LinkedIn when I launched my group coaching program, and she performed.
Next time to do a rap too.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here. I don't know why I'm so nervous, but do you want to quickly introduce yourself to everyone that might not know you in my community? Just a little brief introduction to who you are.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a little bit nervous too. And I think like the biggest thing is your thing is Live with June with Mark Metry, Screw Being Shy in 2021, something about overcoming self-doubt.
Exactly.
Like I have a little bit of self-doubt too, but I definitely believe in myself, and so it's a totally normal part of life. So the best way that I have found to describe myself is every single thing that I do today is like the exact opposite of how I wanted my life to go for like decades. And I have a podcast. I'm an author of a book. I'm in a documentary series. I just try my best. I'm a speaker. Pre-COVID.
Wait, what do you not do, Mark? And Mark is only 23, you guys.
What do I not do?
Right.
I don't know how to rollerblade. I don't know how to go skiing. I need to learn how to do those things, but I don't do those things.
Okay, well, you have the rest of the year to figure that out and learn.
Yeah, of course. But anyway, yeah, I was saying, I live most of my life trying to be invisible. I live most of my life wanted people to like not know who I was or my story or my name, or I didn't even know I had a story. And I was just like that quiet kid, like in the back, who like never spoke up for himself, never was able to be himself. And now that's like all I do. And so I'm really grateful I've been able to kind of take myself and kind of like make it into my lifestyle, the life I want to live, my business. So I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you so much for being so open and being so transparent. And what I would love to talk to you about is actually a few things. Is your book, of course, Screw Being Shy. What motivated? Yes. Let's talk about that first, and let's talk about LinkedIn. So and I know a little bit, and I haven't read, your book is actually on my list to read, must read for 2021. And I know what I've learned just by seeing you on LinkedIn, sharing your story, that what really inspired you to write this book is to share your journey, to share the fact that, your parents were immigrants, You experience a lot of self-doubt, social anxiety. But tell us more. What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, for sure. So I always knew I'd be an author, and I'm gonna write many books over the course of my time, God willing. But the biggest thing is like when I was thinking about this, I was like, hey, I could write a book that I could just use to promote my podcast, that I could write about LinkedIn or something to promote my business. But for me, I really wanted like the start of my legacy to really be about tackling this issue, which is shyness, social anxiety. And the reason why is because I live with social anxiety like all throughout my life. And as a result, I had no friends. I had no deep, intimate relationships. I wasn't in a career that I enjoyed because I could never actually like speak up and participate. And it literally just felt like every single place I went into, my brain would just hold me back. And the
Mm.
unfortunate situation of this is that so much of our world doesn't know about this. And I really think that this is a invisible or a silent epidemic. And the reason why I say that is because there are so many kids today who, whether they're sort of told like, oh yeah, that's just like a quiet kid, or he's just shy, he or she is just shy, or whatever it is, when in reality they could actually have social anxiety. They could be a very social person, but their brain is just literally holding them back the same way mine did. And the craziest part about this is when I was 18 years old, my social anxiety sort of got to its limit where I basically started to socially isolate myself. I started to do different things like substance abuse. And eventually I got to a point in my life where I was so depressed that I wanted to kill myself and I was suicidal. And the craziest part about it is when I was doing my research for this book, it actually turns out that social anxiety, out of a lot of the other like mental health issues, social anxiety is the most correlated with substance abuse and social isolation, which heavily increases your chance of suicide. And
Mm.
so I was sort of looking at this, looking at my life, being like, wait, I'm a living example of this, but yet I don't really see anybody talking about this, or in a way that's productive. And on top of that, for me in 2019, I went on this speaking tour across the biggest cities in America, and I spoke in the biggest cities of America. And every single time, every single city I spoke in, the same exact thing would happen. And I would, be done with my talk, and people would be lined up to come talk to me. And there would always be at least one person who would walk up to me, and I could, kind of see in their eyes that they're super shy, super hesitant. They may be even just kind of like looking down, not making direct eye contact. They could be stuttering, they could be shaking a little bit. And they would always ask me, hey, Mark, how did you go from someone who you describe as being extremely socially anxious, shy, to being able to go up on a stage and, talk to like 200 people about like your life story and be able to like conversate normally without like, getting hammered with alcohol because it's the world's most popular social lubricant. And so, and
Yes.
so it was all those things. I was like, man, I have to write a book. Like before I can write a book that's gonna like benefit my career or like my business, I need to write a book that's gonna deal with this problem that so many people are facing. And yet I haven't really found a book or someone who is able to speak about this from sort of a holistic area of how someone can kind of like understand the root cause and then sort of keep in mind their story, be themselves, and then
Mm-hmm.
also take the right actions that are backed like scientifically, that aren't just based on like my story or like my anecdotal story, but things that are have actually been proven by research. And like that's why my book has been endorsed by neuroscientists, clinical psychologists, organizational psychologists. And yeah, it's been like a great journey. And I honestly, ever since like the book came out the day the world shut down last
It
year in
was in
March,
March, right? And
yeah,
it's like the perfect time for that book to come out. And I and
kind of.
honestly, like, I mean, I know, but like just because so many people, I mean, I've experienced the reason why I'm so open on LinkedIn is because I suffered from depression and anxiety. My father is, you know, bipolar, and I had people in my family, or I've actually had relationships with, that have different issues with, you know, mental health. And for me, I've experienced major depression, major anxiety when I lost my job because of COVID. I lost my identity, and that's when I started following you. So I'm saying that your book probably came in a perfect time just because people need to hear your story. And I love how you've blended like your story about growing up, and like growing up in Boston. Boston, right? You moved here from where did you move from? Egypt? Oh, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Yeah. You were talking
Okay.
about, I think I saw one of your interviews where you talk about, you know, you were experiencing social anxiety when you moved into a small town and you were the only person of color,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. I remember like growing up in the inner city, like living in the projects as a kid. And I like that wasn't even the worst time. I remember having a great childhood. And for me, it was, yeah, when my parents got better jobs and we moved to a small town, like a post-industrial town in Massachusetts on the East Coast. And there was like 5,000 people in there. And yeah, there was no racial like diversity whatsoever. It was like me and like another family, and that was it. And yeah, I remember just like for the first time experiencing racism. And I remember like that just really like psychologically scarring me in ways that I didn't even realize back then. But in a way that really affected me and really caused me to develop mental health issues, physical health problems as well, and then developmental problems in terms of like me making friends, how to communicate, social skills. Yeah, it was really crazy. I don't even believe that was my life. I honestly look back at it now. It's like, whoa, what was that? But I'm glad I'm out of it now, and I'm glad that I did go through that, because ultimately, if I didn't go through that, I mean, I'd just be like a normal 23-year-old who's like interning somewhere. Like,
No, and you're not normal, you know. I mean, but what I loved about it, like your story, is you came from poverty, you came from all of these challenges and struggles, but you somehow were able to learn how to cope and learn how to kind of push through it, right? So was that your biggest motivation into writing this book, as far as not only sharing your story but backing up with research and data?
yeah, yeah, and you know, ultimately, it's like the craziest part is I don't even remember what it feels like anymore. Like I'm so disassociated at this point. But I remember like the mindset, the state of my energy, my psychology was literally terrible. And I kind of see like the younger version of myself in times where I would shut down, I would be angry, I would have like a temper tantrum, I would think I'm a loser, I would feel so alone, and I would really feel like I was locked inside of my own brain. And like the way that I describe it in my book is it literally felt like my mind was at a constant war with life itself. Like I couldn't just let go and just exist. Every single second my mind had to like do like this crazy psychological warfare with social anxiety, with all these different traumas and depressions that I have faced, and ways to deal with it. And yeah, you know, to answer your question, it's like I had to face life head on, and I had to figure out coping mechanisms, and a lot of those weren't the best. Like my coping
Mm.
mechanisms were play video games, go on the
Mm-hmm.
internet and watch random videos, eat food. Um, I didn't really get too much into like alcohol and drugs until I was at least in college. But those are my coping mechanisms, and like maybe they helped me a little bit, but for the most part, they kind of like kept me kind of in my place. And it really wasn't until I hit a real level of rock bottom where I was basically like, sure, I made it out of poverty, but I'm like so mentally like not healthy that, and I'm, you know, suicidal, that, and I have no energy all day and I feel like crap and I feel like a loser, that I literally have to do something. Or if I don't, my life is going to end and I'm literally going to become a statistic. And so it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that dark motivation that I really had to use as like my foundation to like get me to where I am today, of me like days and weeks and months and years of literally just like rewiring my brain and reteaching myself everything.
Right. I think you actually posted this on LinkedIn. There was like a before and after picture. Right? I want to pull
I
it up.
posted that many times. Yeah, that's like my
Yes.
transformation photo.
How many years was that picture apart? I'm gonna try to pull it up.
So I think that was in 2000. That was either in 2015 or 16. And like, you know, if you pull up the picture, that's fine. If not, you know, I pull it up in speaking engagements, and one of the things that I always say is like, you can see how I looked physically. I was like overweight at the time, but I wish you could see inside of my mind. And in that
Mm,
picture, I'm smiling. And the reality is that was the fakest smile I've ever made in my life for that photo. And it's like, I wish people could see the inside, you know, and that's why I talk about like mental health and all this stuff, is because we all just see the external. We all just see like this physical layer of reality. But if you can look at the deeper parts of life, mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological, that's like where the real answers are. And so I always preface that picture with like, I'm smiling, but that's a fake smile. And I
yes.
was not happy at that time, regardless of what I looked like, or how many pounds I was, or whatever, any of that stuff. And so yeah, it's definitely a great before and after for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna share really quickly. Just because I couldn't pull up because I know you post multiple times throughout the week, but I was able to pull it up on Instagram. So
There you
this is the
go.
picture right here. How to create your own transformation. That's just within 5 years. So would you say that that year, that 2015, it says that you were obese, socially anxious, depressed, suicidal, no network, you came from nothing. Was that the year where you told yourself, you know what, like I'm worth more than this. I'm going to get my way out of this. And is that when you kind of started incorporating more healthy, positive habits in your day?
That's a good question. So for me, my rock bottom was like at the end of 2015. It was like the last 3 months of 2015. And that was a time where I was like literally sleeping until 4 a.m. I would be going out at night, just like randomly walking around, not knowing what to do because I couldn't sleep. Going to sleep like all throughout the day. And so I remember at the beginning of 2016, I remember I moved back to my parents' house, and I remember I was just like, because like there's this quote and it says, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." And so when this was
Oh, I love
happening
that.
to me, I had no idea it was happening. Like I literally had no idea. And so for me, at the end of 2015, I really hit my rock bottom. And then that following year, I was like, yo, I don't know what happened, but I don't want that to happen again. And that was like my very, very, very slow start to like read books. I remember I traveled, that gave me some perspective. I started to change my diet, my food around. That started to like help me with my brain and my energy levels. Haha, Edward, come on, man, we got this. Um, and so yeah, you know, it's definitely a journey, and like there was no point in my journey where like all of a sudden I just got like hit with like a bolt of lightning, and I was like, oh my god, I have to change my life. No, it was like literally just like a series of domino steps falling
Mm,
to like years later, you know, again, remember that quote of you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. So then years later to like gaining awareness and being like, oh wow, like I can't believe I did this. Like I'm so glad that I followed my intuition, and I got up and I did something different, and I broke my conscious trance that I've been inside of for the last decade.
I love that. Like you said you broke your what? Conscious trends? What did you say?
Conscious trance. And I can
Trance.
explain that if you'd like
Yeah,
me
can
to.
you? Can you
Trance.
touch on that?
Yeah, Trance. And so
Trance.
basically, you know, what I've learned is like, you know, Will Smith talks about this. And basically what he says is like, the average human being has 60,000 thoughts a day. And some of those thoughts, you know, you're thinking them. And other ones, they're sort of invisible. They happen under the background, but yet they still happen. And Will Smith relates this to like a movie script. And so he
Uh-huh.
says, like, if you look at a movie script and it says, hey, this character is going to say this here, then they're going to say that here. He said that your brain, your thoughts are just like that. And if you could create like a movie script, you could literally predict where someone is going to end up in their life for worse or for better. And so for me, what I began to understand is like, if the average person has 60,000 thoughts a day, so many of us are not taught the right coping mechanisms like meditation, like physical exercise, like journaling, like writing, reading, these things that give you awareness. And so we're just walking around our lives like everything is happy dandy, but yet there's like so much like stuff happening underneath
Yes.
the surface that's like literally controlling all of our behavior in ways that we have no idea. And so for me, like I think back to my life like 10 years ago, or like when I was a kid and I faced these problems for like 10 years, and I had no idea what was happening because I was under like a spell. I was under a trance for my brain. And it wasn't until something in my reality happened differently to where I was like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't trust all these thoughts in my head. And it was almost like this cognitive skepticism, I would say, that was like, wait, for all my life, all these thoughts have been telling me different things, and I've just believed them because they were mine. But, and then I started to dig into the science, and it actually turns out your brain is literally constructed off like this ancient operating system that has these things called cognitive biases and distortions. And so the most common that a lot of people have heard is called the negativity bias, which is if 10 people walk up to you today and 9 of them tell you you're awesome, you're positive, you know, keep doing what you're doing, positive feedback. But then one person walks up to you and they're like, yo, you suck. Like you suck at this or whatever it is, or you're stupid or you're ugly. Your brain is going to excessively focus on that one negative feedback over the 9 negative feedback, 9 positive feedback, excuse me, just naturally. And so we have literally hundreds of these in our brain that literally control our vision, that literally control what we hear, that basically construct our entire reality. And what I learned is when I was facing racism, when I was being bullied, when I was facing abuse, my brain took these things from the outside world and it internalized it in my brain. And so I'm walking around here, yeah. And Jennifer said, especially those going up in poverty. I literally thought I'd be nothing my entire life. I was told I was gonna like work at McDonald's for the rest of my life. I had, no ambition. And so like literally what happens is this is the best way to think about it. Your world gives you these thoughts. Whether you were raised in poverty or you faced racism or you faced abuse or you faced sexual harassment or whatever it is, these things happen on the outside and then your brain internalizes it. It believes it and then it spits that information back to you in your own voice, which is false. And so when I realized that, I was like, oh my God, like all these thoughts in my brain, a lot of them are wrong. A lot of them are not true and they're from my past self. Let me use this as fuel to move myself forward and create a new version of myself. And like the biggest thing that happens, June, is that when you do that, shame goes away. And what I mean by maybe not go away, that's too strong of a word. We all have shame. But what I mean is this. A lot of people, they try to develop themselves. They try to work on themselves. They try to change their behavior. And then what happens, right? They regress. They say to themselves, hey, I'm going to go on this diet and I'm going to, whatever it is, the latest trend, only eat fruit or only eat this thing. And then they do it and then they fail. And they tell themselves like, oh my God, I'm such a loser. I'm going to be this way forever. Hey, let me just continue eating junk food because that's all I know. But what happens is like when you begin to have like this neuroscientific basic understanding of life, you then begin to almost like take the personal stuff out of it. And you're like, wait. Maybe the reason why I'm failing at behavior change is actually because I'm not working with my brain properly. Maybe the reason why I don't want to meditate in the morning first thing at 5 a.m. is because nobody wants to meditate first thing at 5 a.m. And if they do, they're probably lying to themselves. Right. And so it's like literally looking at yourself. I'm like, wow, I'm a failure. I'm like this moral, ethical, problem that's never going to get fixed to, hey, I'm a human being that has like these scientific processes that are beyond me, that have come before me, that like I'm like a part of like the normal sort of progression of human evolution. And instead of looking at something as like an existential failure, I should just look at it like a science experiment of like, hey, let me experiment with this thing. Let me do this thing. If it fails, that's just data. And so obviously
Yes.
it's easier said than done for sure, like when it actually comes to doing it. But that for me was like one of the most empowering narratives that I discovered that actually enabled me to change my life. Because prior to that moment, I had no idea what social anxiety even was. And every time I would want to say something to somebody, but then my brain would tell me to shut up and it would lock me down. Instead of me staying up all night, which I literally remember doing every single day as a kid, being like, I should have said this, I shouldn't have said that, I should have said this, it became like, hey man, like you're just facing this problem. This is like a real problem in your brain. It's like a mental health problem. There are like 4 or 5 different aspects that you can use to begin to heal, to begin to deal with it, that are backed by science, that are backed by studies, that are backed by other people trying it. And what happens is you literally like remove the shame and you're just able to do things. And what happens is you become a freaking unstoppable machine that is able to transform without getting held back by yourself, which is, I think, most people's problems. And so that's one of the biggest things that I would say.
Is this all in your book? Edward asked.
Yeah.
This is like you like.
This is
Oh
chapter
my God.
2 of my book.
I need to read this ASAP because you were just speaking to me, and I think it's really important. Like you said, like look at our failures. Look at the fact that like, okay, we started this new diet. Okay, I binged, I ate and stuffed my face with a bunch of Doritos, and instead of the new day coming in and saying, you know, I can't do this. Look at that previous day as an experiment or market research and learn from that data and apply it to the new day and move on from it. I think if people I'm a career strategist, I work with people that are trying to like break into tech, and I'm always telling my clients, yes, you may have not gotten that job or you may have gotten rejected from Google or LinkedIn, but appreciate that opportunity as a growth opportunity. Understand what you did really well. Understand what some challenges you experienced in that interview and apply it to the next interview. So I love how you're laughing. I'm passionate about this.
I'm laughing because I'm reading Edward's comment.
But like, and then you said once we actually, and then I think it was who was it? Andrea says, yes, rebuild your neural pathways. We have full control of how we look at things, right? And if we look at these obstacles as a way to learn and just kind of grow and be more resilient, then there's nothing stopping us, right?
Right, and I would say too is like, I think it's a balance between having big dreams, but I also think it's a balance of like having realistic expectations about who we are as humans. And so, for example, like I go on LinkedIn, I go on Instagram, and I see these posts. I'm not trying to like make fun if you've ever done this or whoever's watching, listening, but I see these posts that are like, you know, just be positive, or like you have a choice to like control your brain and be great. And I think the big degree is like, yeah, we do have control, but not 100% control. And I think the big thing is like, you know, for me, like one of the greatest things is like I have a podcast and I've been able to interview people who are way smarter than me, people who are like experts in the brain. And what I've learned is that our brain today is fundamentally incompatible with the world that we live in today. And I see that, like, for example, like we have a great example, COVID-19, quarantine. A human being was not meant to stay inside of a room all day and look at a screen. And it doesn't matter how much you meditate. It doesn't matter how much you try to be positive. There are going to be natural consequences as a result of that. Another good example is like the food that we eat. Maybe ever since like the last 75 years or so, there's been a new food group that's been invented, and it's called junk food. And basically what junk food is, again, no offense to like anyone who works in these industries or anything, but basically it is billion-dollar conglomerates
right,
who get together and they're like, hey, how can we create something that people just happen to put in their mouth that has no regard to human quality of life, has no regard to nutrition, and it's basically just about marketing and advertising. And so basically what they do is they take all these like the cheapest ingredients from random seed oils, vegetable oils, artificial ingredients that scientists literally learn in labs, in colleges, psychologists too, literally how to make your taste buds light up in a way that makes you addicted that literally would never be possible up until 75 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it is like junk food, whether it's social media, whether it's pornography, whether it's like all of like these technological exacerbations, these are fundamentally incompatible with our brain today. And that's a fact. Honestly, there is no getting around it. It doesn't matter, how much there's never going to be a spot where, you're going to achieve like 100% happiness. There's never going to be a time in your life where you're never going to have problems. That's just not life, and it has never been that way. And so it's like making sure that like you have a great vision, a dream that empowers you. But then it's also about like having like realistic expectations about the natural world and not looking at yourself as a robot. I see all these people on social media and on podcasts that are like treating themselves as a robot of like, you have to do this, you have to do this 150 times, this and that. It's like, dude, what about your emotions? You know what I mean? And so that's the biggest thing that I'd say. And I love Rachel.
I love Rachel. This is how I think we're connected. And she was on my live last. She was on my live, my New Year's live, and she sang.
Man, Rachel's like one of my favorite people.
I know.
She live stream with her.
Yeah, she's gonna be on my live soon. And I love how you point out that like this is like part of like our life experiences, like these dark moments. There's nothing that's gonna snap us out of it, but we have to use different methods. Like you always share on LinkedIn and on Instagram, like the way you kind of incorporate some positive, healthy habits is like through meditation, through yoga practices. And this is what I do too, as far as like meditation and journaling. It's important too. I think Mommy Rapper says, I wish there was a way there was a switch we could turn off for negative thoughts. I think for that, from my experience, when I do have negative thoughts, I just need to write it out or just talk it out loudly just to kind of exert that negative energy in my body, or dance. Like today, I'm going to be really honest here. I was really nervous to interview Mark, and I was having I was very anxious, and I just did a dance workout and I feel better.
Yeah.
And you just got to do something, whether it's like moving or writing or doing something that's going to kind of distract you and disconnect from those negative thoughts. What is your recommendation on there for anyone that are feeling those negative thoughts that almost kind of paralyze them?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll answer this question two ways. So technically there is a switch that you can pull to shut down negative thoughts, but if that switch could be flicked on forever, I would not want that, because I know that if I had a switch to permanently turn off my negative thoughts, man, I mean, I'd probably be I don't know, like some crazy person, and eventually you would reach negativity in your real life, not just in the thoughts, which I think is worse. But what I would say is this: I think a big thing that's helped me is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That's been the biggest thing that I have learned to literally like shut down the part of my brain if that's ever like happening. Like sometimes it happens to me before podcasts or if like I get like really bad news. Like last year during COVID, I had some crazy stuff happen where my mind was really tested. But there's things that you can learn to like literally shut down your brain, the thinking part, for like a temporary period. But yeah, doing like a dance, doing yoga, going for a walk, listening to music, that's the biggest thing. And I think again, like for me, the biggest thing that I try to hit is just like some sense of balance and some sense of peace. And so what I mean is like, to me, peace is when I could have problems on the outside, I could have issues, I could have 100 different things to do, but it's inside of me, I feel a sense of resiliency. I feel like a sense inside of me, like it literally does not matter what happens. If I get shot in the face, there's still gonna be like this part right here that is impenetrable, that nobody, nothing can access. And the reality is like some days it's there more than others,
Right.
And it depends how you wake up. It depends your morning routine. Depends your neurotransmitters. I think that's the biggest thing too. Like I've recently been advocating for I've recently been making like a difference between like toxic positivity and real positivity. I
Mm.
think so many people are involved in toxic positivity, which is like you're depressed deep down, but then you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be happy. And there are some days where you do have to like, push through. That's a totally normal part of life. But there are people who are really miserable. And
Mhm.
part of the reason why they're miserable is because they think they have to be positive all the time because Instagram quotes have brainwashed them. And it's
Right.
like, hey, if you're not positive all the time, you're doing something wrong. And all like these influencers who are really just running out of ideas to make content that just like say these things that people end up internalizing them, especially people in like sensitive moments that internalize them and create these unjust expectations. For me, what I'm trying to hit is like I'm trying to hit a baseline level of positivity. And like
Right.
for me, I'm always interested in the science because I know that's different than an opinion that someone has. And so for me, I look at what does neurochemically happiness look like? And the reality is that I hate to break it to you, but happiness is nothing but a neurochemical state in your brain where your brain is literally secreting different chemicals to make you feel a certain way. That's literally what happiness is.
Mhm.
And so if you look at it from like that very empirical standpoint, it comes down to a few things. It comes down to like the cognitive biases that I mentioned about before. It has to do with like the first 9 years of your life and trauma and how your brain and your myelin sheath highway got connected and hardwired in. And it has to do with your neurotransmitters. And so I talk about this a lot in my book. And I basically talk about there's this one neurotransmitter called serotonin. And
Mhm.
serotonin is very complex. It does a lot of things in your body. It does things from regulating your mood, which is what most people know it for, but also regulates your appetite, your sleep, your level of sexual desire. And also, on top of that, it also directly controls how you manage and function in social groups. And so, when we're talking about social anxiety, serotonin is super important. And so, you look at the research and look at what's out there, it actually turns out that like over the last 10, 15 years, scientists from Harvard to Stanford to a lot of different prestigious universities have actually realized that most of this serotonin is not directly being created and produced in your brain, which is kind of like doesn't make any sense because it's a neurotransmitter. It should be in your brain. It actually turns out only 10% of serotonin is happening in your brain. The rest, 90% of it, happens in your gut microbiome.
Mhm.
Your gut microbiome is this vast ecosystem of trillions of bacteria that whenever you eat something, you eat food, it directly goes to them. They eat it and they produce a chemical, they produce more bacteria that could be either good or bad. And so what they found is like if you really want to get to the key of like your psychology, then you have to look at food. And like Harvard has been calling this nutritional psychiatry because it actually works. And so there's been various studies where, like, for example, they've taken like kids in South Korea and they took a group of them, they fed them the American standard diet, junk food. They took another group and they fed them natural foods. No strict diet, but just natural foods. Nothing artificial, nothing that comes in a bag. What they found was in the kids who didn't eat junk food, there was a 90% decrease in suicidal ideation and depressive thoughts. And the reality is that when I was doing my book and doing the research for it, there is literally so much research about this. It kind of blew my mind as to how I didn't know about this before. And so for me, it's like, I think if you want to reach a baseline level of happiness, you have to look at your neurochemicals. If you have to look at your neurochemicals, you have to look at your neurotransmitters. If you look at your neurotransmitters, it actually turns out, at least serotonin, the one that's like largely responsible for creating your mood, that is largely based off the food that you eat. And there is no such thing as a universal healthy diet. There's no such thing as everybody should go plant based, everyone should go keto, everyone should just eat this or stop eating that. But the one universal diet is don't eat the food group that was created by scientists, psychologists, and
Mhm.
marketers over the last 75 years called junk food. And so if you can stay clear from that, I guarantee you, in your head, you're gonna start to develop a baseline level of like permanent happiness. Of course, you're gonna have problems. Of course, there's gonna be moments. But when you do that, you are literally giving your body and your brain and your gut the ability to be more psychologically resilient inside out. So that
Right.
maybe one day, if your mindset does fail, then your actual brain, the hardware, it's got you. And so I hope that makes sense,
No,
but
that
I think
does
that's
make
one of the
sense.
biggest things that I've learned about
No, I
trying
love
to
that.
establish that.
Yeah, and when our bodies are a temple, we need to treat it a little bit more healthier by thinking of like what the food that we're actually digesting, what are we putting into our bodies, what are we consuming mentally. So I think you definitely shared really great information there. I'm really excited about your book. I would love to read your book and bring you back on in the
Sure.
future. But I do want to answer Edward's question before I talk about LinkedIn really quickly. But Edward says, did you find that all shyness you research is due to some kind of social anxiety, or are there some people that are appropriately shy?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being shy. And the reality is that there are some people who are just more naturally shy. And like for example, shyness is like you like for example, if you're a teenager, you asking a girl to the prom, it's totally okay to be shy. You doing an interview beforehand, it's totally okay to be shy. The difference is when you become shy no matter where you are. The difference is when you become shy so often that your brain gets used to it and it becomes your personality. That is one of the biggest things that people need to understand. And so there's nothing wrong with being an introvert whatsoever. There's nothing wrong with being a quiet person who enjoys their solitude. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being shy. But for example, for my case, I was shy all the time. And as a result, I had no friends. It didn't matter who I was with. It didn't matter if I was with my family or whoever. It almost becomes like this jacket that your brain wears. And it's like, hey, this is my coping mechanism. This is what I'm going to do. Oh,
Oh,
awesome.
she goes, I totally learned something today. Who knew? Who would have known food plays such a big role in our happy thoughts? I believe that. I mean, I've experienced that with like eating healthy and clean. And I'm gonna be real. I try everything. I'm trying to lose my baby weight from like 4 years ago, and I've tried different things, but I have noticed the different mood changes and energy that I feel when I am eating clean and healthy. So great, great
Yeah.
explanation there. And wait, Mark Edwards says, Mark, bro, stop acting like you're a regular dude. You're a superhero neuroscientist. Just admit it. We won't tell. Okay. One last thing I want to talk about before I have to go get my kids because he has virtual learning at 2 p.m. today. Let's talk about LinkedIn because this is how we've met.
Sure.
I want to share you guys because before, and Mark, and I don't know if I shared this with you, but I have about over 6 years of experience using LinkedIn, but only as a recruiter. And then when I lost my job, I started experimenting on LinkedIn and I just really wanted to share my layoff story to help people out there. And I never have posted on LinkedIn about like my journey, my personal struggles. And July, 6 months ago, Mark.
Wow.
So this is my post that I posted 6 months ago. I think it was the end of July. It says, my final post, mission completed. 31 days ago, I started Mark Metri's 30-day challenge. What was my motivation to start? To bring positivity to the world and provide value to job seekers by sharing job search tips that I picked up from my recruiting career in tech. This is even before I launched my coaching business. And then look at all this has happened just those 30 days. And this is the challenge that I actually posted it on Instagram too. I'm like, should I do
Yeah.
it? I don't know if I should do this. Like, I was so nervous about doing this challenge because LinkedIn is a professional platform and I've never used it to really express myself as a thought leader. And I wanted to share advice, but I always was feeling this imposter syndrome in me. Like, can people take me seriously? And I'm telling you, Mark, if I hadn't have done this challenge, I wouldn't be doing all of the crazy things that I'm doing right now on LinkedIn. So I just want to say thank you for doing this. What was your motivation about? And I'm going to pull up Mark Metri's LinkedIn feed, but he posts amazing content, always sharing advice to anyone out there that's, you know, who wants to be experimental, who wants to start posting on LinkedIn, but they don't know where to begin. What is your reasoning behind this? Like what motivates you to do what you do every day on LinkedIn and what you do in general?
So first off, June, that's so awesome. I'm so grateful that you were able to do that. And yeah, that's so awesome because for me, it's like, especially with this, you know, pandemic, and like spending a lot of time by myself and I'm just like on my phone. Sometimes it kind of seems pointless. I'm like, wait, why am I even doing this? And so the fact that like, you know, you saw something that I put out there, you did something differently. And, you know, as a result, you were able to like, you know, change different parts of your life and grow. And this is just the beginning for you. You know, for me, it's multifaceted. You know, for me, like my main passion is always going to be mental health, but I also know that like careers and developing your career is also a massive part of life, and it's directly connected with your mental health. And I've never found a platform similar to LinkedIn that, like you, I kind of always had. I never used it though, and I was able to use it, and I was able to use it to really build my career and do all the things that I'm doing now much faster than everyone else kind of my age or people doing what I'm doing. And so for me, it's just like now that I'm successful, it's just about making other people successful. Like I don't like to me, of course, I have a business and I do different things and it's great to make money and whatnot and feel cool. But to me, it's just like I'd rather sit there and like teach people what I've done so that they can be successful themselves because I know that you're gonna do it to other people now. And so like so it's like a chain reaction, right? And I think like that's how the world happens. Like and that's why I think I'm successful. It's because someone told me something that someone else told them that they read 1,000 years ago. And so thank you for going to my website.
Yes.
I have to update this website.
Mark, I've always wanted to have my own TV show, and I'm doing it right now on LinkedIn.
Boom. And it's just the beginning. And like there's so much stuff that's happening on LinkedIn in general. And so it's really just getting started. And so I'm so glad that you were able to do that. And I'm sorry, I'm just like so distracted by looking at my website. I'm like,
I'm actually taking notes here because I'm trying to revamp my website. And
oh man, maybe don't look at mine.
No, it's fine. You guys, I'm going to drop Mark's website in the comments. Please connect with him. Please get his book. I would love to bring you back. I just want to say thank you. And I was telling Mark, I just received, oh my gosh, really exciting news before we jumped on the live. And I told him I felt like I'm having like a full circle moment because I'm meeting the man that inspired me to do the challenge, to show up consistently. And I don't know, I just feel very humbled by this experience. I just want to say thank you.
I know what it's like to like, you know, sit on the opposite side and like be in your shoes because I've been there 100 times and it's like truly a beautiful feeling. And like what I would say is like keep it up and the same way that people have had that effect on me and I had that effect on you, now you're gonna do that with other people. And I genuinely think that's how we change the world. So yes. Keep going and thank you for helping me.
Thank you. I do want to ask you, yeah, of course. I do want to ask you one last question. This is a question I ask my clients. Mark, what would you tell your 10-year-old self today that you wish you would have known at 10 years old? Oh, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
No, there you go.
That's why you got to use Restream.
Okay.
Hashtag sponsored. But people ask me this question all the time, and I think I've thought a lot about this. And honestly, I don't think I'd tell myself anything differently. But what I would say is I would just walk up to that 10-year-old version of my younger self and just be like, dude, I'm so proud of you. You have no idea yet. You literally have no idea. But just keep going, do what you're going to do, and just know that I'm proud of you. That's what I would say.
Awesome. Great advice. Well, thank you, Mark. I would love to have you on when I finish reading your book. But I just want to say thank you. And anything else that you want to tell my community, where can they find you? I dropped all of his links in the comments. Anything else that you want last thing you want to share?
Yeah, what I would say is get out there and do one thing for someone else, and get out there and do one thing for yourself. Do both of those things, and I think if you can do that, the day is a success.
Yes. Do something for you and always, always pay it forward. All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for
Edward.
watching the replay. Edward, buy his book. Let's do a book club. Let's talk about it and
Let's do
read
it. It's
and
also
learn
on
together.
Audible too, if you guys like
Oh
audiobooks.
yes, it'd be great to listen to when I run.
And I
But
narrated it.
I'm the
So
type of person that likes to read and then write down notes. So
there you go.
well, thank